Welcome back to theCUBE. We're live here at Black Hat 2026 at the Mandalay in Las Vegas. I'm Krista Case. I'm joined today by my co-host, John Oltsik. John, how you doing today?
I'm well.
You're well.
Almost the end of the day, but I'm still well and looking forward to speaking to Axonius.
Yes, absolutely. So we have Axonius on today. We'll get to that in just a second. We're going to have a conversation around asset intelligence today, John, and sort of the role that this plays in terms of understanding enterprise risk. I think AI agents are sort of changing this equation because they're not these static assets. They have identities, they interact with multiple systems, and their level of risk really depends on that complexity in which that they operate. So as you mentioned, John, we have Axonius on today. We have Dean Sysman, who is the co-founder and executive chairman of Axonius. Dean, welcome to theCUBE. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Dean, you've helped organizations for years answer this question of what do we actually have in our environment? And I'm wondering if you can talk through what's changing in this agentic AI era. I know kind of that discovery piece is still very fundamental.
Yeah. Yes, of course. So we started Axonius about 9 years ago, and we were very surprised that when we were talking to organizations in the market, especially at the large enterprise, but even every mid-sized organization, startups, people had no idea really what assets they had, what was connected in their environment, what was the ownership of those things when they would find them and see that they'd be out of policy or not secured. And I think that once we got started and finding an innovative way that we called asset intelligence or cyber asset management at the time, of really being able to discover everything an organization uses by connecting to any piece of its tech stack. So today we have over 1,400 different integrations we've built, and we go to an organization and we can plug into any kind of data silos that they have, products from cloud, from security products, networking, IT, everything. And then we help organizations build up this picture of what they have. And obviously, we started from devices. That was the first thing that people, and especially security, wanted to understand, where all the servers, where all the laptops. But then very quickly, we realized there are so many different kinds of assets. There's identities, and there's networks, and there's applications. And now we're coming to the age of the agent. How many times have we said that word today already? And agents are this new kind of asset, and LLMs and prompts to those LLMs, that's another kind of asset. And we're discovering that, like when we started and became one of the fastest growing cybersecurity companies in the world, there is another instance of this problem of really understanding how your organization is using AI and whether it's secure or not. And asset intelligence is becoming fundamental to getting control and security over your AI usage.
So Dean, you said something that I think is really important there. You also talked to not only kind of solving the visibility piece of it, what AI is in use, but also how it's being used. And especially as we think about those AI agents, I know that's very important for practitioners, identifying, like we say, what that agent can access, what actions it can take. So can you talk to maybe how you give customers that level of context?
Of course. It all comes down to understanding that organizations don't have a lack of understanding or visibility because they are lacking in data. It's actually the opposite. There's too much data. There's an abundance of it. And what we constantly see is people are looking for this point in time, singular data point to try and tell them what happened. And the right answer is that all of the assets have relationships to each other and they influence each other. And the true answer, what enables you to take action, is to have the full context of the situation, right? So for example, let's say we detect there's some agent doing something in our environment. We're trying to understand, is this legit or is this a threat? Is this controllable? Is this unmanaged? And the answer to that is not just by understanding what that agent is and even on which device it is. It's also what's the identity that's activating it? What permissions did it get? What kind of position is it in the architecture? Is it on our cloud? Is it on-prem? Is it in an employee's laptop or is it in a server? All these aspects of what an agent is doing and how it's interacting with the environment all build up that context layer that is why we call it asset intelligence, right? It's the understanding of how do we draw conclusions from the data, not just giving the singular data in and of itself.
So Dean, what's missing in terms of customers, security stacks and kind of their asset intelligence capabilities today? I guess what are the gaps in terms of them having that visibility and that context into these AI agents?
Yeah, so obviously today organizations want to enable AI as fast as possible, right? Because we're all in a race to being as agile and as robust and as scalable as possible with doing that. And obviously, it's much harder to secure something if you're doing it faster rather than slower. And organizations, they have this proliferation of AI and agent usage, right? And it's not just like the Claude code that somebody's running on their computer unapproved. It could also be AI capabilities within a specific SaaS app, like a Salesforce or a Canva or something that has an AI built into it that you can't see from a device perspective. You would have people using chatbots on their personal devices, but then putting in the prompt company data or company information that they're trying to utilize while they're running the prompt, right? So there's this whole new dimension of visibility that you need to be able to get that isn't just like where is AI being used, it's also the context around that AI. And one thing that we at Axonius did prior to Black Hat, we just launched two capabilities. One is our MCP server that allows other AI tools and capabilities to draw the context, to draw the data from Axonius and use it. But also we even have a native agentic workflow aspect within our platform. And what surprised us was we felt that organizations had already sort of saturated, like, okay, we're set on what's our harness, what's our frontier model, and the answer couldn't be further from the truth that they're still extremely fragmented. They're still looking for, if it solves my problem, I am fine with utilizing yet another angle or another avenue of AI. And we've seen that happen a lot with the usage within our platform of AI. And obviously, that is another example of how wide and how distributed and fragmented AI usage is becoming.
Yeah, Krista, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, please.
So where would you characterize the maturity of your customers? So oftentimes they purchased and deployed Axonius for some tactical need, and now we're getting into the strategic usage. So where are your customers along that continuum, and how are you helping them move forward?
Yeah, great question. So I think that it's always a spectrum, and at the end of the day, any tool is a tool, but what's most important to us is that we identify with organizations where is in their maturity curve, in their growth model of their own capabilities, where are their needs and how can they be addressed, right? And some organizations just start from visibility, just like, hey, we've never been able to really see what we have, and they were aware of it because they had either been breached or they failed an audit, or just because they were aware of it, but never thought that it actually has a solution. But then we move on, like, there's now the ability to really implement your policy, right? Like every organization has a security policy. It's usually just a document that somebody wrote and said, like, hey, this should be this way, this should be that way. But how do we actually implement that and validate that and see that our organization is adhering to it, and when it's drifting from it, how do we take action as fast as possible? And then at the highest level of maturity, you see organizations, we have very large organizations, billions of assets, millions of networks, hundreds of thousands of identities, really like very large, either federal agencies or enterprise networks. And you see them needing to handle, dozens of millions of CVEs across their environment. And how do you prioritize that? How do you remediate that? You have to do that at a very robust scale, and AI is what's allowing us to do that now.
I'm glad you brought up, Dean, about kind of, prioritizing remediation. I think that's been a headline here over the last couple of days at Black Hat, and it's something that, I know John and I kind of talk about a lot, especially in the era of these agentic AI models, as adversaries are able to move at a speed and scale that we've never seen before. So can you talk a little bit about how security teams should maybe think about prioritizing, their level of risk, especially as we think about, going beyond just understanding the identity of an asset to, again, understanding the other systems that it's connected to and maybe kind of the data that it can reach?
Yeah, so it's a fantastic question. And I always talk to people about, like, people already in my eyes, jumped to the conclusion that, okay, we have a lot, we have 50 million CVs in our environment. We got to improve our prioritization in order to be able to decide which ones we address. But the first question that nobody asks themselves, and this really leads to the fundamentals of understanding the problem, is why can't we solve all of them? Why can't we just update all those versions of software and just push out a patch and everything would be fine? The answer is because it would probably break the entire organization, something would not work, and then you'd never figure out even why. And you have to do that in a very gradual, very careful way. And the reason is not the vulnerability, it's the impact of making a change, right? And that leads us back to why context is so important. The only way that AI is going to be able to accelerate our remediation is not by giving us new buttons that we couldn't push before. We could push the patch button, we could push the update or the quarantine, or that we already had all the functions that an AI agent does. But what's different is that we can give it context, and then it can make decisions based on that context, right? Like, we know we need to patch this server, and that's fine, but we know this other server is not as important, so we can put it aside, or there's this other laptop that we have to quarantine because we can't patch it, right? But in order to do that, they have to get that full context that we talked about. Not only what is that CV, but also what is that device? Who owns it? Is it serving some kind of application in our business? If it's our payment server, then definitely don't touch it, right? Like, if it's just some developer's test machine, then yeah, update it. That's the way that context is going to allow AI to accelerate the exposure management world, and we've seen that firsthand with our customers, right? That mentality of the better context I have, the easier it is for me to automate, is really, I think, the path forward to getting to that scale.
Is part of that formula the exploitability of the asset, and are you tracking threat intelligence to be more up to date on that condition?
Of course. So we think any kind of data point, and this is what we call the context, right? The fuller it is, the better of an understanding you can have. So we can integrate data from threat intel feeds. We can integrate data from exploitability information, whether it's technical or whether it's from the field of seeing statistically what is the use of that CV being exploited. There's also the elements of who is the owner, right? Like, if there's a vulnerability on a company's laptop of the CEO, that's way more important than an intern, right? All else being equal. And that context could be dependent on any data point that you don't even think of before you see that decision, right? So the right answer is to be able to always pull the full context and all the data points around something, and you can only do that ahead of time and not once you already need it.
Of course.
Yeah.
So Dean, John asked a couple minutes ago about sort of where your customers are at in this maturity, journey. And I guess maybe tactically speaking, once customers have, the discovery component addressed, what are some of the next steps that they need to take to then, do everything we've talked about, kind of prioritize, what agents exist, and kind of address the governance from that perspective?
Yeah, I think that the next step after visibility, like you said, is how do we draw the intelligence from the data, right? Because also visibility it starts off with just a list of these are the things that I have, and then understanding their roles, understanding their criticality, whether of security or of operational capability, understanding their ownership, and all those things are the result of applying intelligence to the data. And the way we have seen it be most successful, and what I've heard from customers these days, is that if you go to the last couple of years, with AI really being the number one topic, I feel that still when I talk to organizations from large to small, they still felt like there's too many changes and they have to wait until they understand what they want to bet on for the future, and what will last and what will stabilize. But this year, I think the tone has been very different, that organizations have realized this pace of change is not going anywhere, not in the near future, and we have to be able to pull the trigger on making meaningful advances, even if we don't have a clear picture of when those things stabilize or what's going to be the number one and number two of every function or capability. And they have to make bets, even deep technological bets, that they don't know whether will be the same kind of bet in the longer future. And I think that's taking them, like we said, once they have visibility and they're trying to understand the intelligence from it, the biggest catalyst for doing that is they want to feel much more safer in being able to automate more, right? And the more visibility, the more understanding, and then the more context you have around your environment, then automating becomes much easier to do at scale and in a secure manner.
So my friend Krista here is very focused on cyber resilience. From what you're saying, it seems like this is a requirement for cyber resilience. Am I right in that statement?
Of course. I had the pleasure of giving a keynote at RSA talking about what is the perfect security world. And the perfect security world is that we have systems that aren't impervious to breaches, because that's impossible, but they're systems who are self-healing or self-securing even, right? Whatever happens, they know exactly what's the right action that we would want them to take, and they know exactly what is the right way to operate within the context of the business, within the context of the security strategy and policy. And we're not that far, right? Like, it's pretty encouraging to think about that. Like, the perfect security world is within, the horizon of what we're seeing today. And it's really uplifting to think that you can get there while we're seeing, the Hugging Face incident, the Anthropic rogue Python package that got distributed. We're seeing like the capability here could be just as powerful on the other side. And I think it's really encouraging to believe in what it can give us from a positive, defensive standpoint of value.
I think there's a lot to be optimistic about there, Dean. I certainly agree. And if I'm a practitioner here at Black Hat, and I'm looking to kind of make that a reality, what are some of the one or two things that you would suggest that they start to take action on next week when they're back?
Yeah. So first of all, really try and be honest, or really raise your standard over what you perceive as the right amount of visibility in your organization, right? A lot of, when we started the company, and also to this day, when I talk to people, they're like, it's fine. We think we're fine. I think I see all the important parts. But then that's how so many of the breaches happen. That's how so many of the bad things, they always come from, there's like the famous boxing quote, like, the punch that knocks you out is the one you're not expecting, right? So I think raising the standard of the fact that you can gain visibility over everything, and you should. And the second thing is that once you have that clear asset intelligence, when you have the clear context layer, and this is exactly how we're seeing customers use our MCP to connect to the frontier models that are using, or using the new agentic capabilities native in our platform to run automated workflows that remediate those 50 million CVEs. Once you have that contextual layer, you have a lot more confidence in automating and letting the agents really give you scale and robustness.
Absolutely. And Dean, you referenced kind of the OpenAI Hugging Face incident, and I think that really was a demonstration of these interconnected AI environments and the potential risks there. So I guess if you had a takeaway from that, what would it be for security leaders?
I think that we always have to remember that agents and AI, just like the code that we write, will do exactly what you tell it to. The problem is our own visibility over what that could manifest into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dean, thank you so much for joining.
Of course.
We really
thank you for having me.
appreciate it.
This was a great conversation.
Absolutely. And John, it's a pleasure as always.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you, Dean.
Thank you. We
thank
really
you.
appreciate it. And thank you for watching. We'll be right back in just a couple minutes with our wrap-up of the day here at Black Hat 2026.